it's pretty important before you ride. You really should have some sort of health insurance, some sort of coverage for your medical bills.
That would be my advice, yes.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. Honestly, if you can afford it with the motorcycle coverage, and they do have a med pay, but even if you don't have the med pay, if you have very good insurance through work, if you're working in a company that provides you with quality insurance, that'll pay for your medical treatment as a result.
Welcome to Riding Counsel with Rich Jaffe, where the open road meets expert advice. I'm Richard Jaffe, an attorney and biking enthusiast, and this is the podcast where we dive into the world of motorcycling, safety, culture, charitable giving, and riding right. So, whether you're a seasoned rider or just getting started, let's talk bikes, the road, and everything in between. Let's ride! Thank you very much for coming to our podcast. We have a special guest in the studio today, and I don't think he needs any introduction, but I'm going to let him introduce himself, his name, and a little bit about what he's about, and then we're going to get rolling with some really good questions. So, who are you?
My name's Steve Tiger. I'm a partner, law office Cohen & Jaffe. I've been doing plaintiff's personal injury work since 1995. That's what I do, litigate personal injury cases.
So let's start out with the important things first. Before you sat down here, you grabbed a bagel. I saw you grab a bagel. Don't try to get out of that. And I want to know what your favorite bagels are.
Well, I didn't take my favorite, but I had a plain bagel today, but my favorite isn't everything, but there were none left in the bag.
Okay. All right. So you just went with plain?
Scooped, trying to lower the carbs, a little bit of cream cheese.
All right. This is very important, extremely important. So you put cream cheese on there. Do you like anything in the cream cheese?
I have the scallion cream cheese, which I do like.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, I think I smell that. So appreciate you eating the scallion cream cheese before sitting across from me. And thank God our listeners can't really smell this.
Lovely.
All right. I mean, you're a New Yorker, so you know bagels.
That I do.
All right. And you grew up in New York, or you came here when you were a kid?
Born and bred. Born in Brooklyn, lived in Queens, moved to Long Island, where I still live.
All right. What part of Long Island you live in?
Port Washington.
And what's that like?
Nice. It's like a waterfront sort of community. Sort of seems more New Englandy than Long Islandy. Not a lot of big box stores, small businesses. It's nice.
Okay. Well, you said you do personal injury law, and it sounds like a big umbrella, personal injury law. So, what is it about personal injury law that you feel is something that you grabbed onto and you're like, yeah, I really like doing this?
Well, basically, it's fighting for the little guy. So you have people who get injured, usually due to no fault of their own. They go up against big insurance companies or big municipalities, or people have unlimited funds, and they try to deny or delay paying the claim. If they treated them fairly, we would have no business, but I stand up and fight for them.
So I'd imagine doing this a long time, you've got to know a lot of people in the world that, I mean, you represented, and I'd imagine that you come from all walks of life.
Correct. Yes.
So, when somebody comes in and they say, look, I need a lawyer, what do you think is the most important thing for them to really grab onto when they're looking for a personal injury lawyer?
I think there are a couple of things they have to focus on. First and foremost is communication and open lines of communication with the firm. Some of the biggest complaints about other people in this area of work is that they don't speak with the client, they don't communicate. There has to be trust, obviously, to be completely transparent and open with us. And they need people who are going to be aggressive and fight for them in an aggressive manner.
So have you handled any kind of motorcycle accident cases?
Lots.
All
yes.
right. So do you ride a motorcycle?
I do not ride a motorcycle.
So why would somebody say, hey, I want this guy if I'm in a motorcycle accident case? I want this guy.
Well, because I understand the difficulties that the motorcycle riders, interact with on the road every day. Visibility problems for drivers who are not paying attention. Issues with them having the right of way of the motorcycles, but the drivers sort of just disregarding them. Obviously, motorcyclists have also some stigmas that you have to overcome because some of the community feel innately if they see one or two bad motorcycle riders that all of them are bad motorcycle riders. One of my earlier cases dealt with a gentleman who was on his way to work at 8 o'clock in the morning. He was traveling the speed limit on a main road, but his motorcycle had flames on the tank. He had long hair.
This episode has been brought to you by Riding Counsel. Don't forget to visit us at ridingcounsel.com.
He was dressed in all of his leathers. So innately, I think that the insurance adjusters believe automatically that there might be some issue with his driving. As it turned out, it was clearly 100% not his fault, this incident, and he got a very substantial recovery afterwards.
All right, good job. Good job.
Yeah,
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But I think part of what you do is, you're a trial lawyer. You go to trial.
If we need to, yes.
Right. And when you go to trial, there's certain components that you have to go through before the trial. I mean, there's preparation, you got to issue subpoenas, and you have to do a bunch of things to make sure all the proper documents are there and all the right people are there. And then you do something, it's called voir dire. And maybe you can explain a little bit about what voir dire is.
It is questioning the jury and trying to find out if they can be fair and impartial under the specific case that you're there for. You're not allowed to go into a lot of specific facts, but you can go into underlying prejudices or underlying beliefs that the jury may have.
And so you're questioning the jury, but they're not really a jury yet, right?
Prospective jurors.
Right. So we're choosing the right people. Right.
To the best that you can, correct.
And if you're representing a motorcyclist, clearly you don't want people who are very prejudiced against motorcycles. So how do you question these prospective jurors? Because you want a jury that's fair and impartial, and you don't want somebody coming in and saying, I don't care what the evidence says. I want, you don't want that kind of person. You want somebody who's actually going to listen and be open-minded. So how do you weed these people out, especially when it comes to like a motorcyclist?
Well, it depends on a bunch of different factors, right? Because some cases get to jury trial, you've already determined liability. If the liability has already been determined, I think the prejudices that may be there against the motorcyclist are not as important because the injuries are what the injuries are. But if you have to deal with a liability issue as to whose fault is it a motorcycle versus a car? Could it be a motorcyclist versus a little grandma who's driving, a sedan? You have to ask them point blank in the jury selection, once they hear the minimum facts that my client's on a motorcycle, before they get to anything, you try to get them to talk. What do you think about that? What have you heard? What are your feelings just learning that the plaintiff was on a motorcycle and the defendant was driving a sedan? And just get them to talk, because if you ask someone point blank, can you be fair and impartial, usually in a big room of people, most people are going to say yes.
Right, that's not really getting information out of them.
No, you want to get them to talk. Right. So you just ask sort of open-ended questions. How do you feel about that? What do you have any opinions based just on what you've heard? Have you had any interactions? And then when you start to talk to the people, and you'll find out if anyone rides bikes or if anyone has family members who've been either sued or been plaintiffs in motorcycle-related accidents, and what are their opinions of it, and without hearing anything else, if you can't start on an even playing field, if the defendant is starting with any sort of advantage, they're off the jury for cause. If they're not off for cause, then you only get 3 peremptories, so it comes down to feel and,
So wait, a peremptory, what's a peremptory?
A peremptory challenge is a challenge you can get rid of a juror just because. You don't have to have a cause reason. They can as long as even if they say they can be fair and impartial, and even if they say that they're going to listen to the evidence, you get 3, and you can still get rid of people as long as it's not based on, only on race or something else like that.
So if somebody is a prospective juror and they're really trying to get on the jury because they think they're smart, because they're smarter than everybody else, so they want to say, okay, I'm going to get on this jury, so I got to get past these lawyers, and I'm really going to hurt the plaintiff because once I get on that jury, I'm going to rule against the motorcyclist. What do you do with that kind of person who really tries to outsmart you?
I mean, hopefully you've had the peremptory challenge left and you can challenge the person. If not, obviously you're trying to balance the jury with as many people as you can get that are going to be favorable or fair, rather, and impartial, and will be able to speak up and not fall for the guy's crap in the jury room, and basically stand up and advocate for the plaintiff.
Now, there's all kinds of bikes, right? I mean, I myself ride, and I ride a Harley Davidson. It's a touring. It's a road glide, 24. I love my bike. It's absolutely beautiful. But there's other kinds of riders out there. There's sport bikes and ATVs. And do you see more motorcycles than other motorcycles, meaning maybe more sport bikes or race bikes or touring bikes that are actually involved in accidents?
I don't see a difference in the amount of injured motorcyclists based upon the type of bike. I haven't seen that. I just know that there are certain prejudices that are going to be more apparent for different types of riders.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Well, I think if you see I'm not the biker, but if you see like the old ninja style, racing bikes where the guys lean all the way down to the one knee on the turns, and you've had any experience on the highways seeing a bunch of those 20 or 30 guys come flying down on those, racing bikes. If you had a racing bike client, that's something you'd have to overcome, that the jury or people might assume just because of the motorcycle that that's one that they would be racing or weaving or doing all sorts of, unsafe driving, which is not necessarily the case.
Right, right. So there's all kinds of motorcyclists, people who ride bikes, right? So just like there's so many bikes, there's so many different bikes, there's also different kinds of riders. So how is it that you can get across to like the insurance company or the jury or even the judge that your client is not the irresponsible one, but rather the responsible rider?
Again, this all comes down to credibility of the witnesses and the ability of your own client to be able to testify as to what he or she was doing in the moments leading up to the accident. In today's climate, obviously, there's more video, there's some dash cams, there's other ways that you can prove. But just based on the bike or just based on the biker, obviously, you can't really find out what that person was doing until they're deposed. They give sworn testimony, and they come across. Again, like the first individual I told you, if you just looked at the bike or a picture, you might jump to a conclusion. But he's on his way to work, where he worked every day for years, commuting just like any other commuter, not in a hurry, not going anywhere, not on a joyride trying to break some speed record. He was just going to work. And once he was deposed, that came out to all the parties involved, because the insurance company's lawyer obviously is going to write a report back to the carrier after the deposition as to the believability or credibility of the witness. Also, they're going to write back of the appearance of the witness. And, when you go to court, most of the, they're not coming, fully dressed. Some do, some don't,
Well, that's another thing. So, I'm dressed today in my leathers. I'm in the biking mood. So, and they're comfortable, they're nice, but it's a stereotype, I guess, when somebody sees that, I'm wearing some biker gear. And, I'm wondering how that plays when you go to court or you go to a deposition. What role does what you wear to court or a deposition, what role does that play in their case?
I mean, I think we feel the same way as in any professional atmosphere. So we just instruct the client to wear what they would wear if they were going to court, right? If you're going to court, even if you're in a deposition and it's not court, it's still a legal proceeding, and just dress neat, clean, and, as comfortable as you are. That goes for anyone, bikers or not bikers. I don't want to, especially in Zoom, I don't want to depose someone who's laying in their bed in a T-shirt and eating food during the deposition, which I've seen.
Yeah.
I'd rather them dress appropriately, not a three-piece suit. You don't come in a tuxedo, but, just dress appropriately. Again, the clothing in and of itself isn't going to make the case or break the case, but I would still advise the clients just to dress, in a professional way. Like if they were going, let's say you're going to a court appearance or you're going on a job interview or you're going anywhere, dress appropriately, for the situation.
All right. Well, I ride a motorcycle. I'm a lawyer. And you're a lawyer. You don't ride a motorcycle. So do you feel like I would be better suited to represent a motorcyclist than you?
Not necessarily, no. I think you would possibly be better to question about certain factual issues with the operation of the motorcycle potentially, or the maintenance of the motorcycle, and you might be able to connect more with the rider potentially on the facts themselves. But as far as advocating goes or proving the legal liability of the defendant, I don't think that makes a difference at all.
Because I see all these commercials, whatever they're called, law tigers, we ride too, or somebody else says, okay, I ride. So I guess their claim is that because they ride, they feel like they're the better lawyer, or they're hoping that people out there who are injured in a motorcycle accident say, okay, well, I got to have somebody who rides a motorcycle because that's the best lawyer. I mean, I ride, but I don't really feel like that makes me the best lawyer just because I ride for somebody. I really feel like it's a connection to the client and really understanding not only how the accident happened, but how the accident has affected them, because each injury to each person is different.
Correct. I agree. And I think as far as the riding goes, you might be able to connect more with the law if unfortunately, as a result of the impact, the person was no longer able to ride. That loss of enjoyment of life, that loss of enjoyment of a relatively large portion of their life, because the people that do ride love riding, just like guitarists like playing guitar, or people who pick up basketball have to play every week, right? And then if they can't do that, I think your experience riding might help you connect with the loss of enjoyment of life and the loss of that very important part of their pre-accident daily routines or routine. Whereas if you don't ride, you might not be able to really understand that. The same way as if I play and pick up sports still, I'm 58 years old, I still play. I had a surgery recently. I was out of commission for quite some time. My mother can't really understand why I'm even upset that I can't do that anymore. But some guys who play in the game with me really understand what's happening. So I think from that point of view, that's the only real difference I think you would be able to have as a rider versus a non-rider. But, my experience doing this for 30 years, I can connect with all different types of people and understand how it's affected their life regardless of whether I've done the activity or not.
It's sort of like when you ask a motorcycle rider in another aspect of life, where it doesn't have to be a motorcycle rider, but if you ask them, do you live to work or you work to live? So you really have to have a balance there between what they really live for and what they really enjoy in life versus working and doing other things.
Agreed.
Yeah. So, but you also mentioned some other things. There's different aspects to the case. Now, we talked a little bit about how the accident happened, but how do you find out how that accident happened? The investigation portion. How important is that?
Obviously, it depends on the various facts. If it's an uncontroverted motorcyclist who says, I'm stopped at a light and some guy ran into the back of me, just like every other rear end, you wouldn't really need to do too much investigation. If there was a police report that the defendant admitted in the police report that he struck the stopped motorcycle in the rear, you wouldn't really have to do much. But if there is a motorcyclist sometimes who's had unfortunately, if you're on the bike and you get tossed, you can have some relatively significant injuries. Some people aren't aware of even what really happened. Then you really need to dig in and get the investigation going. So we have investigators that we use that we're very happy with that'll go out, canvass witnesses, canvass for video. Sometimes you have to hire engineers or accident reconstructionists to look at the damage to the vehicles and come up with put it back together, reconstruct the accident. But it all depends, right? It depends on witnesses. It depends on each individual case. Some cases require a lot of investigation to prove the liability. Some, you have a dash cam footage, or you have 10 witnesses that were driving with the motorcyclist. He's driving with his or her crew or friends, and they all saw what happened, and you really don't need that much investigation. It depends.
I find a lot of times motorcycle accidents happen because the roads are so bad. And I think, at least I get the feeling that the various municipalities around here, the town, city of New York, different parts of Long Island, the county, they make the road drivable, but when they say drivable, they only consider cars. And I think what they really have to do is think more about motorcyclists, because when you have a pothole in the street that a car can go over, a motorcycle may not necessarily go over that so well. Have you encountered something like that?
I mean, I think in general, most municipal entities they're going to spend as little money as they can to repair the roads. And in the wintertime especially, they all know that the pothole repair that they do, the cold patch where they put the gravel in, you may have heard it if you drive a car or a motorcycle and you go over it, isn't going to hold. It's not going to stay. But they have the law on their side. I think a lot of things that they do are only in consideration of the motor vehicle, the four-wheeled car or trucks with more wheels. They don't really consider the motorcyclists as they should. We had a case here where a motorcyclist was getting off of the bridge and was heading to the Cross Island Parkway, and some of your listeners may remember this, but as you went underneath the overpass off the Whitestone Bridge, you could have went to the Van Wyck or you could go to the Cross Island. As you went under an overpass, there was a construction plate that had been sitting in that area, and the pins that hold the construction plate down were there, and the motorcyclist came around a curve, hit the pins or the plate, bounced up in the air, came down, and it was a very smooth metal surface, and lost control. That plate had been there for like 11 years. If you look at what these plates are for, they're just emergency to cover a hole. They should have only been there until they fixed it. They never fixed it. Even years after the litigation was going on, that plate was still there. And I think recently it's been finally replaced. But, they don't fix it. And that is certainly a condition that would not affect the motor vehicle the way it affected the motorcyclist.
So you think something like that might be a case, even though there's so many cars that are going over the same area, but a motorcycle comes and something happens?
Yeah, that was a case. I mean, we had a successful recovery in that case. That was a case that we brought only against the municipality and only for that particular plate, which in and of itself was not dangerous to motor vehicles, but it was dangerous solely to the motorcyclist. Right?
So these motorcycle accidents, they happen, and they seem to happen all too often. And I'm wondering if you see motorcycle accidents happen in a way that happens more frequently than other kinds of motorcycle accident cases.
The ones I see more frequently have been mostly intersection type accidents where the motorcyclist has the right of way traveling on some main road or just any road, but mostly the more larger thoroughfares like Jericho Turnpike or something like that, like the bigger roads. And the offending vehicle usually is either coming and turning usually in front of the motorcycle in some way, either pulling out from a T intersection in front of the motorcycle or making a left turn into the path of the motorcycle because they're not looking for the motorcycle. So they'll see there's no vehicles or cars, and then they'll just turn and there is a motorcycle that's clear as day that they should have seen, and motorcycles have their headlights on all the time, and they should see this person, and they don't, because they're not looking for them. I feel like that's the more common fact pattern that I've been seeing personally, a lot. And then the motorcyclist, has no option, but they can't go anywhere. I've had cases where someone pulls out from a T because they see a car in the right lane with its blinker on, and in the left lane is a motorcycle, but the girl didn't see the motorcycle. So she pulled out and just stopped at the double yellow line. And the motorcyclist is coming, and he's like, what am I going to do? Can't go right. There's that car making the right. I can't go left over the double yellow line. There's oncoming traffic. What am I going to do? He had to drop the bike, and it was a horrible accident, horrible injury. There was no way to go. And I've had other people, same thing, pull out in front. Motorcyclist ends up getting thrown. We have, now in today's climate with more video everywhere, we have video of these horrible accidents that are happening. And you see the the vehicle that is driving just turn left right in front of the motorcycle. They just don't see him. And that's the biggest issue that I see, at least currently.
So a lot of motorcyclists that I've represented that talk to me, and also people who I haven't represented, but they want to know the answer. When somebody's in an accident like this and they're riding a motorcycle, they get hurt, and they say, who's paying my medical bills? Because there's no way I can get all this treatment, take care of myself as a result of the accident, and pay my medical bills. Well, how do people manage to pay their medical bills?
Unfortunately, New York State doesn't have a requirement for what we call no-fault insurance, which is required for all motor vehicles. Specifically left out are motorcycles. They're not provided any no-fault coverage. So you have to, if you're going to ride, my advice to you would be to make sure you have adequate insurance, that you may be able to get some med pay coverage under your motorcycle only policy. But obviously, if you are in a job and you have great insurance, you can use your insurance for it. Eventually, some insurances are allowed to claw back the money that they have laid out, but that's a little more detailed than this conversation. But for the most part, they should just use the insurance. If they have no insurance and they have no way to pay for anything, then it'll be our job at the conclusion to try to recover from the offending vehicles, assuming they had enough insurance coverage. But that's not going to guarantee you get your medical bills paid.
So it's pretty important before you ride, you really should have some sort of health insurance, some sort of coverage for your medical bills.
That would be my advice, yes.
Yeah.
Big time. Yeah. That you have the best, honestly, if you can afford it with the motorcycle coverage, and they do have a med pay, but even if you don't have the med pay, if you have very good insurance through work, if you're working in a company that provides you with quality insurance, that'll pay for your medical treatment as a result. And
well, what I run into a lot also is riders who, they're up here in the New York metro area, and it gets cold. It gets cold. I mean, today is a pretty cold, yucky day. People aren't going to go riding, and it's pretty typical of, say, the winter months, December, January, February. And so to save some money, they say they cancel their insurance, and then they reinstate it sometime later when they start to ride. You have a feeling about that kind of activity?
Personally, I think the downside of that is if the beautiful day pops out in the middle of the winter and all your buddies are going out riding and you decide, no, what, I'm going to take a shot. I'm just going to go today. What's going to happen if something happens? You're going to be left out. And the insurance for you may not cover all your medical bills, but it does provide you with coverage in case someone else gets injured. If there's a passenger in a motor vehicle, for example, and the motor vehicle hits the motorcycle, and that passenger brings a claim, they can bring a claim against both vehicles. The other driver can bring a claim against you. There could be 100% fault. There could be some split of fault. If you drive even that one day without the coverage, you leave yourself exposed.
And what happens if they go out and they have no coverage for that day and they wreck their bike? Who's gonna pay for the bike?
And again, that's certainly another aspect. If you pay for the property damage coverage on the motorcycle, you're not going to have it for that day.
Yeah.
So I think it's a little risky to do that unless you honestly take your bike and lock it up and are not going to use it during those months. There's no way, no how. I guess you could do that strategy. I just don't think that's a great strategy.
Riding a motorcycle is addictive. Anybody who rides knows. So that ain't happening. Any day, I mean, it's supposed to be 60 degrees on Sunday, and I can't believe it since it's like 20 degrees right now. But I'm going to try to get out there. And anybody who cancels their insurance, I mean, boy, you got to turn it on and off, and especially on a weekend, you just don't want to do it. I don't think it's worth
listen,
the
I'm
risk.
not here to do any business for the insurance carriers. I don't need them collecting premiums for people that aren't riding. But, you have to do your own cost-benefit analysis. But the risk, if you actually are going to use it, is not worth it. It's probably better to just pay the premiums throughout the season, unless you're going to Florida and you're leaving your motorcycle here and you're not taking it with you, But if you went there, I'm sure you guys would take the bike with you anyway. So I'm sure it's not going to be sitting up here.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I really want to thank you for your time coming in here to our listeners and explaining a little bit about the law and how the law treats motorcyclists. You really did a good job of exposing the importance of having insurance, even though we're not a big fan of insurance companies to begin with. So thanks a lot for coming on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot.
All right.
Take it easy.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Riding Counsel with Richard Jaffe. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed the ride, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share with your fellow riders. Until next time, keep the rubber side down and ride safe.